So today I'll be showing you how I'm going to be removing my rear wheel, diagnosing a collapsed wheel bearing. Right, so first symptoms was me having a slight wobble in corners. I originally thought it might have been the front wheel balancer being washed off my bike when I gave it a quick clean. But that turned and progressed into a clunk when I was doing 90-degree turns. And it progressively got worse and worse. I lost confidence in the bike. I started doing a little bit of research. And it wasn't the drivetrain and it wasn't transmission. It was nothing internal, which was great. So upon looking at the front wheel, I thought everything was all good. And then looking back at the rear wheel, it was more than obvious that something has gone on with the rear wheel bearing. Metal shavings here. You can see it right there. And the sound. First things first, we need to take the chrome cover off the axle nut. Most Harleys have them, mine does. Very simple. This is a 332 Imperial Allen key. It's 3 bolts. So remove it on the right side and the left side, and it will expose the axle nut. Next we want to untie the axle bolt before jacking the bike up. This one is a 19mm half-inch hex socket. 3/4 will do as well. Then we want to jack the bike up a little bit so the rear wheel's off the ground. And we want to spin the wheel. I don't know if you can hear that, but that is a massive grind. Shouldn't do that. This side seems okay visually. When you look on this side, you can see the axle's not sitting in the middle. It's actually hitting the wall on this side and a big gap on that side. And you can see metal shavings all on the paint, all around here. Next, we'll take the chrome guard off the belt. Usually there's a plastic part right here to stop all the mud and dirt, but I took it apart for aesthetics. So very simple, 13mm and 13mm. Now I've already loosened those bolts. Okay, so I forgot to press record, but not a worry. We've removed the chrome cover for the axle and for the belt guard. Next, for us to remove the rear wheel, the rear brake caliper has to come off. Super simple. It's a T40. Small bolt at the front, big bolt at the back. take that out, drop that down. That's it. The mounting guard mounts onto the rear wheel itself, into the rear frame I mean, so that doesn't have to come off. We'll have to take the tensioners out, not completely, so there's enough room for us to move the wheel to the front to loosen up the belt. So that's a 14mm, do one this side, do it on that side. Really easy to do. Again, jack your bike up. I'm gonna drop mine a little bit so that when the wheel drops from taking the axle out, it doesn't create a sudden movement which can unbalance the bike. So I'll drop it down a little bit. That's enough. Now we're going to take the rear axle out. You want to loosen it. It's going to be a cap at the other end. Take the cap out, put it away, then the rear axle will be able to completely come out now. This is the mounting bracket for the chrome cover. It gets held down by the washer and axle. Put that aside. Keep taking the axle out. We're gonna grab a little mallet, the hex socket, and we're gonna bang the axle out from this side. Move the belt out of the way. Spacer in there. That's the spacer there. So the wheel's cleared. Jack the wheel, jack the bike up a bit. Woohoo! Jesus Christ. So just make sure you grab your spacers. This bike will need a new one. It's completely chipped. All right. Yes, I think we need a new bearing. How's that? Pressing on the bearing, maybe a bearing skip, creates that clunk. Alright. So I'm going to take the pulley off and clean all this out. 16mm socket. I've already cracked all the bolts. Let's clean this up to the best we can. It's probably going to be using some degreaser. Right, so we got the wheel all cleaned up, all the parts taken out. I managed to get the inner race out, all the bearings, and all the gunk. But as you can see, the outer race is still inside of the hub. Little tiny bit of damage there. I thought that potentially the wheel was unreusable, but I took it into a Harley mechanic. They are an authorized dealership in Queensland, and the dude did confirm that the damage on the inner hub is not significant and won't affect the performance of the wheel if I was to repress it with a new bearing. Essentially all it is the seating component of the bearing itself. So it's not going to affect the rotation of the wheel or anything like that. So I went and bought myself a rotary tool. This one is a Ryobi tool from Bunnings. We'll be able to grind the outer race here, just to loosen the pressure. Probably one here and one there. Hit it with the chisel, and then from then on I should be able to pull the bearing out. And obviously we're going to be very careful not to grind the damaged part or the hub itself. Yeah, there we go. That should make the bearing a whole lot easier to get out, since it's not completely pressurized anymore. Okay. The first tuck on it was really hard, but the rest, easy. You see the little wedge I cut there? Alright, so just cleaning things up a little bit. I do feel a spore here. And a light one right there. Not a biggie, everything else is flat. Just gonna grab the rotary tool and sand that down a little tiny bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, just enough so that the bearing can slide in a lot better. And this is the inner spacer here, which I was recommended, was okay. And this is how it got scratched up. So the bearing would have failed, and usually it sits against this, but the bearing failed and it had a lot of movement, and as the space itself started rotating around, it started cutting the groove into the spacer, and that's how I got these jagged edges. Not a problem. Again, I'm just going to grab the sander. I'm not going to sand it too much. It's just to take the sharp bit out. Just sand it down, sand the spore down, and it should be all good to go. Alright, so it's been a little while now since I've taken the bearing out of my rear wheel. Approximately about a week. I had to wait for my bearing puller kit to arrive. This is a OMT bearing puller kit from eBay. Same puller kit that you might get, but variation of prices, probably about 20 bucks. I got mine for I think $68 delivered from eBay to Australia, and the same kit can go upwards of about $85 or so. So it's worth a little bit of money just to shop around, I guess, and get the cheaper one, considering that they are the same. Can attempt to link this in the bio, but just keep in mind $68 for the installer and puller kit. So today I went to Harley. I asked them about OEM rear wheel bearings, and they said they were $40 each. And some of you that's watching this might already know that Harley Davidson bearings are not the best compared to other manufacturers and brands, especially for the price tag. So I thought, why not call up the local bearing shop in my town and see what they have. I asked for Koyo, which is the owners of Tinkham bearings. I gave them the dimensions of the Rocker C, which from memory is 52 by 15 by 25 millimeters, and they knew exactly what I was talking about. However, they didn't have any of the Tinkhams in stock, or the Koyos, and were recommended these Nachi bearings instead, off the shelf. They are a Japanese manufacturer that's been around for almost 100 years, so that is a good indication that they are okay. And I got two for $21.50 rather than two for $80. Big difference. So this is what we're going to be installing today on the left and right rear wheel. First off, we always when doing bearings, I suggest, and anyone else would suggest, to do the left and right side while you're at it. Why not? I think there's absolutely no reason as why someone should skip out only doing one side. Unless there's big cost factor. I mean, if my left bearing or right bearing was okay and only one went, then I might go, $40 for one. I'll just do one. But considering these are only about $10.50 each, no excuses. That being said, I'll have to take the bearing out on the brake, so the right hand side of the wheel. So I'll be taking that out and pressing these two in today. Let's get it going. That's how your bearing should come. Very basic. There's actually a lot of videos out there, people showing you how to use these bearing kits. I'm just going to basically go over it. If you need any help, obviously do some research. Plenty of examples on YouTube. But yeah, so okay, so this is me showing you guys how to actually use the wheel bearing installer / puller kit, but I'm fast forwarding it because looking back on it, I feel like there is way better videos and examples out there on YouTube where people are demonstrating how to use this kit. I did a fair job of it. It did the job, blah, blah, blah. But yes, for a more detail, more insight, better example, please do look up on YouTube on how to use this installer and puller kit. It's very simple. Essentially speaking, it's just putting the tools together and turning the wrench. So right here, I'm just setting up the tools, getting it ready, putting it into the hub. And as you can see, it's just a very simple process. I'm using a adjustable spanner with a, just normal spanner, and I'm just turning it, locking it in, making sure it's tight. And then once it's tight, we can use the main bolt to be able to extract the bearing out of the hub. Simple process, took me about 15 minutes to set it up. But yes, please do check on YouTube. A lot of videos out there demonstrating how to use this tool. And to me, I felt like I was, showing you guys with less detail, and certainly the camera angle is not as good as a more detailed video out there. So don't be afraid. Do your study, do your research, get used to the tool, and we'll continue on with the video after the bearing have been extracted. This was the good bearing. Bearing still seems okay. It's a little bit sticky. HD bearing, HD 8276 bearing. Yeah, there you go. I did see a little groove on the inside of the hub where this failed, and that was actually from me putting a chisel, well, a flathead screwdriver in there and hammering it in, trying to yank it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand that down a little bit, make it a little bit more even, a little bit more flat, so I can install the new bearings in. There's a little fall up there. Boom! Gone! Might turn this down a little bit. But that's smooth, very smooth. Same as there, alright? It's actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. Oh. I'll do that. where the bearing seats against, there was little tiny jagged edges, and I just quickly sand that down. That's smooth. That is as smooth on this side as the other side. You wouldn't even be able to tell which side had the bearing failure, except of course the dust on my fingers. This is the inner spacer. It's got these grooves on it. Just gonna sand that down. Beauty. Wouldn't even notice. So no sharp edges. Yeah, no, perfect. Look at that, no sharp edges. I can run my finger all along that all day. Do the hub now as well, of course. I mean, not the hub, the pulley. Spool there, smooth it out, and right here, smooth that out too. Same deal there, just made it really smooth. No sharp edges, same here, no sharp edges. And the pulley, a little bit there, but we're not going to worry about that. This is how the pulley will look. So the inside, nice and smooth. So I'll clean it all up and we'll press some bearings in. So I've done a little bit of research, the best I can, and taken advice from the Harley mechanic shop. Our plan of approach is to press this bearing right all the way in, as much as possible, just so it's seated against that lip. And then once we do the right side, we'll go ahead and install the inner spacer. Okay, so I just want to clarify this information. It is very important that you press the right hand side of the bearing all the way up against the lip first the right hand side lip where the right bearing sits against is much closer towards the edge compared to the left hand side. So you do the right hand side, you put the inner spacer in, then you press the left hand side bearing in, not necessarily all the way against the left hand lip, but enough so that it touches the inner spacer. Make sure that it is able to be moved up and down, not left to right. And it is very important that you get this right, or else you're not going to be able to fit the axle and all the outer spaces onto the bike properly later on. So once you press the right hand side and the left hand side bearing together, you want to make sure the bearing spin both sides. And once you tighten up the axle later on, it'll bind and work. Wheels bearings are in. The rear inner spacer is lined up for the axle. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see, but the bearings are spinning. The inner race is spinning very nicely. Same with the other side. Let's check. Yep. But you can't hear the inner spacer moving. Alright, I can move my finger up and down with the spacer, both sides. So we can move it up and down to line the axle up. Alright, so it's not going to bind up. So, boom. Make sure it fits. Yep, lovely. That's it. So on the rotor side, again, I pressed it all the way in. And then on the pulley side, I pressed it as inward as it could without seizing up the inner spacer. Right, so what we're going to do now, my bad. What we're going to do now is going to put the pulley on, we're going to put the rotor on, and we're going to torque it to spec. I've written all the measurements down here. Rear rotor, usually I'm estimating about halfway, so 40 foot-pounds of torque. Front rotor, 21, we're not doing that today. The pulley, torque spec, 60 foot-pounds. Rear axle, 100 foot-pound. Rear brake caliper, it's bolted onto the frame, so it's not as important, but roughly 40 foot-pounds. Australian made Warren and Brown deflecting beam torque wrench. It's non-ratcheting, it's very basic, but it gives a 2% accuracy and also apparently has a lifetime warranty and it won't go out of spec anytime soon. So I thought, you know what, I'll get the proper torque wrench. So I'm going to open this for the first time and show you this. It's very heavy. On the review said about 1 kilo, built with quality. It's pretty simple. Loosen it up, set your torque spec, click the button in, and really cool. They are the people that created this type of deflecting beam torque wrench. Cost me $259, but again, lifetime warranty. Buy once, cry once, right? So we'll get this going and we'll put this baby to the test. I'm going to use blue Loctite. Alright, so rear rotor 40 foot-pounds. Turn that up to 40. Right. Press the button, ready to go. non-ratcheting, so they only go one way. See how it goes. Is prime ready to go? You can keep out for that. Okay. Boom. Alright, rear pulley, 60 pounds. Just double check. There we go. Alright, torque specs in. Alright. Let's put this back on the bike. Okay. Alright, so I'm getting everything ready to put the wheel back on. So we got the belt cover, the axle spacers, and all the washers lined up. Got our tools, which is our Warren & Brown torque wrench. We got our 19mm hex bolt for the axle, breaker bar, a hammer. We need a measuring tape to realign the wheel on both sides. We need a 3/8 ratchet. This right here is for the bolt that lines up the wheel. And this right in here, the T40, is to put the rear brake caliper back onto the frame. Now, just a heads up about my rear brake caliper. I do need new bolts. So it was advised for me to put new bolts in, and I do need new bolts. Those bolts are stripped, but for the purpose of this video, I'll put everything back on, and obviously later, next week sometimes when I have time, I'll get new bolts in, take these out and tie them up to spec. Okay, so we're going to proceed. Oh, and also very important, this is going to be the order the axle goes in. The hollow side will be on the right hand side, and that side will be on the left, which is the nut. So we got the washer, right, so it'll slide through, washer, then the frame will go here. First little spacer, second little spacer will get pressed onto the bearing. Then obviously that's your hub. Then you got the big spacer on this side, and next to the spacer you got the tiny little washer here, right there. Then you got the left hand side of the frame, right, and then next to the frame you got this washer, and then that nut that ties it down with. Okay, so that's the order it's in, which is like that. Okay. So what I do is I usually just so the wheels lined up pretty good with the frame, so we don't need to lower it or hug anymore. Alright, so just getting everything ready. What I usually do is I put that big washer on first, just move the wheel to the side a bit, and then wiggle that in so it's there. The frame will hold it up, just leave it there. Alright guys, so what I'm doing here is inserting the small washer on the left hand side of the big spacer between the frame. The washer is the smallest washer, it's very thin. So as you can see, I just wiggle it in, and I put my breaker bar through to hold in place so that when I work on the right hand side, it doesn't fall out. This side in. Alright guys, so it's going to be a lot of wiggling and jiggling around trying to fit everything together. What I'm doing there is just placing the rear caliper mounting bracket, and then trying to fit the two spaces on the outer side. So just remember the order. It goes axle, then the washer on the outer frame, and then on the inner frame it is the smaller spacer, and then the bracket, the brake bracket, and then the bigger spacer, which will sit against the hub. So everything will fit into place as long as it is in the right order. Just keep persisting at it and you'll get there. Big spacer, rear wheel caliper, mounting bracket, little space, washer, the rest. Push that through. Fucking earth. Ah. Okay. Bloody axle's in. Now, I don't know how to do that properly, but every single time I've tried myself, it's been a bloody pain. Right, so everything is put back together. Just remember it has to be in the right order for it to fit. Realistically, that process took me about half an hour of just constantly wiggling around, taking things apart, wiggling around. As I said before, as long as it is in the right order, it will fit. I'm just gonna pop this up. Pop that up. Yeah, my wheel can spin. I think it's a little bit easier. Right, so what I'm doing here is just tightening up the axle a little tiny bit so that everything binds together, but not enough for me not to be able to move the wheel up and down for readjustment. So just double checking that everything is together so it doesn't fall out for whatever reason. At this stage, I've also put the belt back on and pulled it back and getting it to be aligned and adjusted. Alright, so space is in. All that's in. The wheel can spin. Belt's on. To just quickly line up. Okay, so I've put blue Loctite onto the bolts and just tying up everything by hand, making sure that the bolt is roughly where the orange mark is on both sides. And what I'll do then is try to pull back the wheel just a little bit behind the orange mark, considering that this bike was probably adjusted and realigned by the previous owner, and that was more than 5,000 plus kilometers ago. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have it pull back just slightly behind the orange mark, and that's how I'm going to adjust and realign the wheel. I don't have a belt adjuster tool, which is going to be the tool predominantly used to set where the rear wheel will be fit and how far back. But as you can see now, I'm just measuring things, seeing where they are. Alright, so I nearly forgotten to put on the chrome cover brackets for the rear axle. Pretty simple. It just goes over it like that. You will need to loosen the axle nut, but not completely. So what you'll see me do is loosen up the axle nut on the right hand side. That piece there is broken, but it's okay. I could put it behind the washer and tighten it up. So yeah, just loosen the axle nut a little bit, pull it out, shove that there. Make sure the 2 bolts are at the front and the 1 bolt is at the back towards the left hand side. With the other side, same thing, pull the axle back a little tiny bit, take the nut off, chuck that there behind the washer, and tighten everything back up again. Simple. Now we gotta align the rear wheel. See a orange mark, which I'm guessing was a mechanic that potentially adjusted it from the previous owner. And I remember it was just right there. So this bike had a little bit more kilometers since that adjustment made. So I'm just gonna push it back probably about a ½ inch and call it a day. And next time I'm in the Harley Davidson shop doing whatever I need to do, I'll probably get the bike looked over and tell them that potentially the belt need adjusting. So we're gonna do it like that. I'm gonna use my lower axle nut at the start of the nut as a guide and straight down the middle. So it looks like I want to be at about, I'll set it about 415 mils. Okay. Alright, so I started doing my measurements, lining everything up, and as said, it's 415 mils that I'll be lining the left and right axle at, and that should give a little bit more tension to the belt than previously set at, which was guided by the orange mark. So I'm just going to the left and right side, checking that everything lines up. So at the start of my tape measurement, there's a nut right at the bottom of the swing arm, and I'm pulling that tape measure back, measuring it at 415 from the left side of the screw. And what I'm doing there is just tightening up the adjuster bolts so that it is seated against the axle on both sides. And once it is seated on both sides, you'll see me remeasure everything, double checking whether or not I have over tightened the adjuster screw. So boom, I'm backing it off a little bit, double checking, is it 415? Yep, sure is. Doing it on the other side, probably untying it more or less, making sure it is at 415. Again, how did I get that number? There was an orange mark on the left and right side of the frame. Now I could have realigned it to there, but my logic is that could have been done years and years ago. I have put 5,000 kilometers of hard riding onto the bike, so I thought I'll move it back about a ½ inch. Alright, so we're near at the end of the video now. I'm just putting the rear brake caliper back onto the rear brake caliper mounting frame and onto the disc. Just having a little bit of trouble because the piston came out a little bit. So I'm just doing my best to jam the piston back in, loosen up those brake pads a little bit. They do need to be replaced, and I do plan on replacing them another time, and that might be for another video. But right now, from the looks of it, I was able to get the calipers back onto the disc. And keep in mind that these bolts that I have are actually stripped, and I've read on many places that you should be replacing your brake bolts, your rear brake bolts, when you do changes. So I'm just tightening it up by hand, boom, boom, boom. And the torque spec on these are 40 foot-pounds. So as you can see, I'm getting my Warren & Brown torque wrench out, setting everything up, and I'm pretty sure the Torx bit is a T40. So I know the bolts are stripped because I wasn't able to actually torque it to spec, but it was enough for me to be able to place the brake back onto the disc and potentially ride it around a little bit. I will remind myself that it is not torqued to spec, so I won't be doing any, rear brake skiddies anytime soon like I used to do on a push bike. So that's the rear brake caliper mounted. Alright, so I am now tightening up the rear axle. the torque spec for this is 100 foot-pound, which is halfway between recommended torque spec at 90 and 110. My Warren Brown torque wrench is a 3/8, so I'm able to only set it to 90 foot-pound. So when I was trying to tighten the axle, the bolt was spinning. So what I was doing is grabbing a pair of pliers and holding the left side as I was tightening the right side. I think I've ended up figuring out if I did a complete rotation with the torque wrench, it actually grabbed the nut and I was able to torque it to 90 foot-pound. Okay, so usually you'll have a 3/4 on left side and then the 19mm on the right, and you'll be able to torque it like that without the bolt spinning, but I didn't have that luxury. But I managed to be able to torque it down to at least 90, and I was able to finish the rest off with a breaker bar at 100. Alright, so now I'm putting the chrome cover back on. It's pretty simple. It's just a lot of fiddling again. 3 bolts, 1 on the left hand side and 2 on the right hand side. Sometimes you just got to wiggle the inner bracket in and out, but it should line up and you should be able to put the bolts through. I did use a little tiny bit of blue Loctite, and that should be it. Same scenario on the left hand side as well. Okay, so this is the last thing that I'm doing. It is a chrome belt cover. Very easy. It is 2 bolts. One is actually a nut and one is a bolt. So from memory, the right hand side was a stud nut, had a bit of a point to it, and you just screw it on. That holds it together. On the left hand side, there's a small bolt. You put that on the inner side, push that through the chrome cover, and there is a spiky nut that you put over it. Very simple. Tighten it up. I did use a little bit of blue Loctite as well. On the left hand side there, I had to hold the bolt with my plier, and I was able to then use the ratchet to tighten it up. So pretty cool, pretty easy, and that is it. Lowering the bike down, making sure the wheel spins, just slowly lowering it. I'm holding it with my left hand, pulling it up, making sure that it sits on the stance. And look at that, beauty, all done. Alright, so the bike's all put together. Last night was a bit of a drag trying to fit all the spaces onto the rear wheel, but persistency is the key to it, and just with a little bit of wiggling and fiddling, it should go on as it was before. So no loose bolts, no missing bolts, which is good. The wheel spins freely. Spaces aligned with the hub and the inner race, right in the center, which is good. Yep, the belt's not loose, but it's flexible. I think I've read somewhere it's about 2 inches flex. That's about 2. Chrome cover back on. can probably tell, she needs a good cleanup, which I'll do later today after a long ride and test it out. That is it for today. I still have to edit a video how I installed my Trask assault air cleaner paired with the breather hose kit. So I've been trying to source a stainless steel fitting for this to upgrade from the standard plastic one. And I thought when I do that, I'll be able to take everything out, clean it, put it back together, and I'll do a video on that. So that's going to be next. And after that will be the big project, which is to install these 2020 M8 breakout wheels onto the Rocker C. But it's a big project because I have to do a white glide conversion. I got a new white glide black from, I think, HHI or HTI, whatever it is. HHI, which is a little bit wider. So it should be good. Alright, so I've taken the motorcycle for a spin, and I can confirm because I moved the rear wheel back a little bit and tightened up the pulley. It had a good effect on the bike. I felt like on the low end, it made it a little bit more responsive. Not too much. I mean, it is a stock 96 engine, so it's not going to do much of a performance increase. But I think because the belt is a little bit older, and since I moved the wheel back from the original marking, it gave it a little bit less flex, and it's probably closer to spec now. Okay, so we'll probably change the pulley belt later in the future when we change the gearing to 30/70. But here's a video of my bike idling after the big ride. Alright, so that wraps up the video, and I want to thank everyone for spending the time watching it. I know it is a long video, and I tried my best to edit out any unnecessary information and chit-chat by fast-forwarding it and doing a voiceover. Do keep in mind, I am not a qualified mechanic. Everything is a learning curve for me. That being said, it's always good to learn something new, especially about the motorcycle that you ride every day. So if anyone got any comments, suggestions, tricks of the trade, anything alike, please feel free to comment, and we can have a discussion about it on this YouTube video. Thanks again.